Hello, my name is Todd McLaughlin. I'm here at Native Yoga Center in Juno Beach. And today I am going to discuss and show and demonstrate a few different tips and techniques for helping to develop Padmasana, Lotus Pose, the ability to put one foot up on one thigh, the other foot up on the other thigh, and sit in meditation posture. All right, let's begin. Let's see. So the first time that I encountered Lotus Pose, I remember seeing somebody, I saw someone sit in Lotus. She said, "Here, try this." And I brought one foot up, I brought the other foot in, and was like, well, what do I do next? How do I even, when this is so tight, when our hips are so tight that we would attempt to try to bring this foot up, and there's no way. There's like, this is absolute edge. And I thought, no way. I thought, there's no way. There's no way I'm going to be able to practice Padmasana. Let it go. My hips were really tight in the external rotation position. So diligently over years and years of practice, before I knew it, I was able to sit in Lotus. It just took a bit of concentrated effort to get the hip rotation, the external rotation of the hip flexible enough that the knees feel okay doing it. Now, I really want to be honest with you that if you have any knee pain, one of the first things I want you to do is test your ability to bend your knees fully. Are you able to sit with your hips on your heels? This is a really good test, because if you have a hard time putting full flexion pressure into your knee joints, I don't think you should sit in Padmasana right now, because Padmasana involves having full knee flexion. The knee is going to be in complete state of flexion and a little bit of rotation. So the leg bone the lower leg bones are going to actually rotate a little bit. Now, the knee is really a hinge joint. It has very minimal, has some ability to rotate, but it's very minimal. So one of the key aspects in Padmasana is the ability to seal the calf against the hamstring. Now, in Ashtanga Yoga, we do a whole host of hip openers in primary series that prepare us for the ability to sit in Padmasana. The first place Padmasana appears is in a pose called Garbha Pindasana, and this is well after the halfway point in primary series, where there's this lotus where we slide our arms through the lotus. It's a very advanced, difficult pose. It assumes that you have the ability to sit in lotus to begin with. So what I want to point out, though, is that the poses that we practice in primary series leading up to that are all helping to build the ability to sit in lotus. Notice we have the Ardha Baddha Padma Paschimottanasana. This is where we take a half lotus. For most of us, this is going to start with our foot on our leg and our knee in the air. And so this is like a very beginning way to approach the Padmasana. And what is important, the knees are very complicated joints in the way that the amount of ligaments and tendons and like the MCL, the medial collateral ligament. Other words you'll hear are, you have your iliotibial band, the IT band comes across the lateral edge of your knee. We have what's also called menisci, double but two meniscus on the medial meniscus and the lateral meniscus. These are like little bushings that are in between the bones. There's a lot of things that potentially can go wrong when you start torquing your knees. I mean, it's just how it is. So Padmasana is an advanced yoga pose. If your hips are tight, Padmasana is very difficult. It's very painful. Usually what happens in Padmasana when we first start to attempt to do it is our feet don't really go up very high on the thighs. You get bone pressure on top of bone. That hurts. You get ankle kind of twisting feeling on the bottom part of the ankle. That can hurt. We might have knee injuries. We start torquing the knees. That can hurt. So the most important thing, I've been at this for a good amount of years now, practicing yoga over 30 years and strong hatha yoga and Ashtanga practice for 20 plus years, is that I've gone in and out of having knee pain over time, and I've had to sometimes do Lotus and sometimes not. And so this is really important. I want you to take it slow and steady. I mean, you hear me say this over and over again in all my tutorials. You got to go slow and steady on your knees because we got a long journey ahead. And why am I doing this? I'd like to have good flexibility and mobility in my joints, but at the same time, I don't want to hurt myself trying to create more mobility so that I have less mobility. So this requires finesse, and it requires just listening to your body. If you have pain, don't look at what everybody else is doing and try to copy what they're doing. Feel your body and honor your edge. I want to give you that disclaimer before we start, because this is an advanced pose, and all of these half lotus positions do require that we take into account what history we've had with our physiology in relation to the injuries and accidents that we might have already had in our previous sporting life existence, and what our ego is in coming to the table when we come to yoga. Are we doing this just to show off? Or are we doing this to achieve liberation, freedom, and peace in our mind, in our bodies, in our soul? So that's a good question to get clear on before you start practicing yoga, period. However, I know we don't all start that way. So with that being said, we got to start off with the half lotus. The half lotus is the key. Now, the half lotus really is this ability to flex the knee, to close the hamstring against the calf muscle. And in closing this, bringing a little bit of rotation. And part of the idea is that you take the lateral edge of the foot, the pinky toe edge of the foot, and try to fit it into the inguinal ligament. This is this little crease of the hip. So a really great pose, in my opinion, for preparing for Lotus is what's called Marityasana B. Marityasana B. You take your right foot, you bring it in. Now in the beginning, you might put your foot on your knee, bend your left knee, and hold in a half lotus, loose half lotus position. And remember, you're always going to always work both sides evenly. Either breathe and count your breaths, 1, and hold up to whatever number you choose, and then do the same amount of time. Or the other idea, hit the stopwatch, time it, hold it for 1 minute, switch sides, hit the stopwatch, time it, hold it for 1 minute. Another great pose, the preparation for what's called Ekapada Raja Kapotasana, one-leg king pigeon pose. This action right here is very similar to what we need in the Lotus. The Lotus position requires strong external rotation of the hip. I'll repeat some of these terms to help drill it into your mind so you start learning the anatomy and the physiology and the movements and the terms. When we are moving the leg in this direction, this is called external rotation of the hip. When we practice the pigeon prep pose, we are creating, right now I have a external rotation, but now as I go down closer, this is called flexion. So this motion of flexion with external rotation really will open up what are called the deep 6 lateral rotator muscles in the hip. The prime mover, or the prime one you'll probably be familiar with, is called piriformis. Piriformis is a muscle that, as we stretch the piriformis muscle, we find we are able to get a little extra range in our external rotation. So in the process of doing this, another way that this can be done, if you have knee pain, the same thing is the thread the needle. Now look how the thread the needle is more or less the same position that we are practicing in the Marityasana B, more or less the same position. And so what I'm doing here is I'm showing you a technique that will allow for you to let gravity pull down versus you forcing down. The other element is that here we're attempting to manipulate the pelvis. So right now I'm in a posterior tilt, and what we want to attempt to do is come into an anterior tilt. So instead of rocking back and rounding the spine like this, We'll lean against the hands and lift the chest and attempt to get an anterior tilt. The more that we are able to take external rotation of the hip, flexion and gentle rotation of the knee, and to create range of motion here is to either posteriorly tilt the pelvis or anteriorly tilt the pelvis. And so as we gain and work this range of motion while holding this external rotation of the hip or the femur, this is how your lotus starts to open. All right. Good. So, you know, all of these, let me just kind of recap. Half lotus, pigeon prep, Marichiasana B, and thread the needle are all really good external rotation hip stretching positions that can prepare you for the Padmasana. Now, I used to teach Bikram yoga. I'm a certified Bikram yoga teacher. I don't teach it anymore. But one of the ways that we'd practice the advanced class with Bikram, with Mr. Chowdhury, was to do this sort of motion where you take your foot and you make circles. You pull the foot in, you take the foot away, you pull the foot in, you take the foot away, and we're basically trying to make a circular motion. And what this does is it kind of exercises the external rotation of the hip, gets a little bit of knee flexion. This action here gets a little more stretch on the lateral edge, and then you come forward. And so we're making like circular motions. And this is a really good one for kind of preparing the hips plural, for the lotus position. You're just generating a little bit of heat in the body, kind of loosen the hip and the knee up so that you never want to force this. I am telling you, I learned this the hard way. I was so keen. I wanted the Padmasana so bad. I've popped to my knees before, like big old pops, not able to walk, hard time walking. We learn the hard way sometimes. So, but now once you get sufficient flexibility in the hips, then the Padmasana becomes possible. Did this help? Do you have any questions? Have you come across any other tips and tricks that you found work phenomenal for you? Have you ever had to rehab a knee injury? I'd like to hear about it. Send me a message in the comments. Send me an email, info@nativeyogacenter.com. Check out my website, nativeyogacenter.com. I'm going to reverse my lotus. Now, typically in Ashtanga, we always do right foot first, left foot second. And then you think, well, why? Let me go ahead and reverse it. And you go to reverse it, and you're like, whoa, that's way harder. Why is that nowhere near as tight or deep? So if you do the same thing over and over again every day, always the same way, usually the hips will start to generate a little bit more tendency toward being more flexible with the right leg first and the left leg. So it can be a really good idea to start coaching, training your hips to start to get comfortable with sitting in the Padmasana in both styles. So there's this. Another really good hip opener for this pose is Baddha Konasana. Bring the soles of your feet together, pull your heels in close to your hips, and start working on pressing. If you're here where your knees are up, don't try to sit in lotus yet. We got to be able to get the knees down pretty flat to the ground before you want to start taking the feet and doing this deep crisscross applesauce kind of shape. So another really important pose is here. Now, the other thing is that just simply sitting on the floor, cross legs, is one of the best ways to get your hips to open up. Just sit down on the floor. Get off the chair, get off the seat, get out of the car, off the plane, whatever it is, get down on the ground. Sit down on the ground and just start working on your being able to log more and more time sitting on the floor. If you try to sit every day for an hour on the floor, your hips are going to open up. If you spend an hour every day, I mean, an hour is a lot. Okay, so let's just say spend 5 or 10 minutes every day doing some hip stretching on the floor. You'll be shocked at how quickly your hips respond to this. So now everybody's different. Everyone has a different genetic component, bone length, structure, muscle, history. So, it's not appropriate for everybody. I know yoga teachers that have had to have knee replacements because they push their lotus so hard. Think about it. So if that happens, big deal. You get a knee replacement, you move on. You just don't sit in lotus after that. Have I met somebody that's had knee replacements that sits in lotus? I'm sure there's somebody out there that's done it. But most of the folks after that, no, that doesn't seem like a good idea. So, again, this is why I'm thinking longevity, long term. And I hope this information helps. Do you have any questions? Send them my way. If you're watching on YouTube, hit the subscribe button. Follow new videos every single Thursday, new podcasts every single Friday, and occasionally I get a chance to even add more videos into the equation. Check out my new course, 8 in 8, Learn 8 Limb Yoga in 8 days, description below. Click it. It's totally free, completely free. Try it out. Give me feedback. Let me know what you think. Have a great day. Hope you enjoy. Namaste.